All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the DATAcated show. More importantly, happy Valentine's Day if you're celebrating Valentine's Day. We're trying to talk about analytics for all, and the way it ties into Valentine's Day is we all love analytics. I think for the most part, most of my DATAcated audience loves data. They love the data analytics, and I just wanted to bring everybody here today for about 45 minutes. We do have a special guest that I'll introduce in a minute, but before I even do that, I'll just give you a little bit of a glimpse of what we're going to talk about today and introduce our fun giveaway. So, the topic of the day is analytics for all with Alteryx Analytics Cloud. And I absolutely can't wait to have this conversation with everybody. I want to remind you that, if this is your first time joining the DATAcated show, or maybe if you've forgotten, we do take questions from the live audience as they come. So we don't hold them for the end. If you've got a burning question while we're having a conversation, drop that into the comments and we'll make sure to address as many of those questions in the next 45 minutes. Now, we're doing a fun giveaway in this Valentine's Day theme, so you can actually win a free t-shirt. We'll have two winners. It says I heart data, and I'm assuming everyone who's joining us here today hearts data. So I'm going to actually tell you how to play right now. I will share my screen and let you know. Those who are familiar, I think, are already in there playing. The hashtag is hashtag love data. And what's going to happen is you put that hashtag into wherever you're joining us from. So if it's LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, or Twitch, drop that hashtag in there and it automatically gathers your information. Halfway through the show, we'll give away one shirt. Towards the end of the show, we'll give away another shirt, and I will ship those to you personally. All right. On that note, I'm going to go ahead and tell you who we're going to have on the show today. We're going to have Adam Wilson. He's the Senior Vice President and General Manager of Alteryx Analytics Cloud. Super, super excited to have him here with us today. I'm going to go ahead and bring him up on stage. Hello, Adam.
Hey, all right. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. Happy Valentine's Day and welcome to the DATAcated show.
I'm thrilled to be here. I'm coming to you live from Sydney, Australia this morning, so clear across the globe.
Yes, and it's bright and early for you. Yes.
That's right. That's right. It's never too early to start talking data. So,
I love it. So what brings you to Sydney, by the way?
Lots of customer meetings, and also our Auto Insights team is headquartered here, so it's a chance to catch up with the team and to spend a little time with a number of banks and insurance companies and big retailers here in the region.
Yeah, it's great that we can actually, see each other in person again, right? So you can actually meet them.
I
Exciting
know.
stuff.
What a novel concept.
Yes, I know. It made everyone appreciate it a bit more, I think, that whole break.
That's right.
So I think a good place for us to start is with some introductions. I think the audience would love to hear more about you. What is it that you do, and what do you do at Alteryx, and sort of what brought you there as well?
Sure, absolutely. So I currently am in charge of Alteryx Analytics Cloud here at Alteryx, but really have spent my entire career in data integration, data transformation, data cleansing. Most notably before Alteryx, I was CEO of Trifacta. So I came to Alteryx through the acquisition that occurred almost a year ago, and was at Trifacta for almost 9 years. From the early days of pre-revenue all the way through the phases of early stage growth and customer acquisition and ultimately the merger with Alteryx. And so that was a super exciting run for us who were part of what's new and what's next in data, and really bringing in cloud capabilities and establishing a cloud platform here at Alteryx. So that was a lot of fun. Prior to that was at Informatica for 13 years, from IPO to $1 billion in revenue. Was part of the management team that scaled that organization, running product management, product marketing, and a variety of general management roles there during that tenure. So it's been data for me, from the very beginning, and it's great to. I would say there's probably been no more exciting time in data than now. So for those of us who are here this morning, this this is the frontier for competition, for most organizations. And so it's great to see people who have been long-standing data professionals and have made their career all about data, really coming to the fore.
Yeah, you mentioned Trifecta. I feel like it just happened yesterday. So it's been a year, right? Since
It has. It's the year has flown by, but it's been just an incredibly exciting year, for all of us getting a chance to join forces with Alteryx, and there's a lot of exciting announcements that are coming up that really, I guess, represent the culmination of the last 12 months of effort. So I won't spoil the news, but stay tuned for some excitement over the course of the next couple of weeks. So
yes, that definitely should be exciting. And Adam, you said data, data, data. So we've got a question here from the audience, from George. He's asking, what do you love most about working with data?
yeah, I think what's interesting to me to see is how organizations that have gone on this journey for so long. There was a period of time where if I sort of wind the tape back to the early part of my career, where it was all about, hey, we need to start thinking about digitization. We need to start thinking about transaction processing, automating a lot of that. We need to start thinking about the business process reengineering that comes with that. And the data pieces were always a bit of an afterthought in terms of the analytics. And so a lot of in the early days, a lot of this was sort of thought about as the janitorial work with data, the stuff that sort of was required but wasn't glamorous, that just sort of needed to get done to support a lot of what was going on, in the front office. And I think what's really interesting now is that companies have woken up to the fact that they compete on information as much as the goods and services that they make and provide. If they want to cater to long tail segments in their market, if they want to manage and model risk better, if they want to welcome uncertainty into their businesses, they realize that agility with data is really the thing that's going to allow them to do that. And so now you're really seeing data products, becoming the thing that allows organizations to differentiate. And for me, that is it's super exciting, because you got a lot of creative people now that have access to more diverse sets of data than ever before, that are able to manage and manipulate that data in new and interesting ways to really get to outcomes that drive the business. And so when I get a chance to spend time with large as an example, pharmaceutical companies that are working on clinical trials, and they tell me that they're able to give their scientists, not data scientists, but literally their chemists, access to data now that allows them to go in and to self-serve and to stitch together not just the traditional clinical trial information, but experiment data, assay data, real world evidence, so behavior data that are coming off of devices like inhalers that they're testing, and that allows them to get products to market in instead of 13 years from inception to FDA approval, shrinking that to 5 or 6 years, like cutting that in half. You see the impact that has, not just on their top line, but on the health of the population. And that's a data-driven thing, and to me, that's just super, super inspiring. And I think we're still, despite all the hype, we're still, I think, in the early innings of what this is going to do to transform organizations and markets and kind of the world at large. So
absolutely agree. You mentioned diverse data sets. I feel like they're limitless. It's just the amount of data that we're collecting from, like you mentioned, the sensors. I'm looking outside my window and I see houses. I'm assuming in a couple of years, these houses will be just talking to each other, talking to the trees, and everything is just going to, and the amount of data collected from all of that is just going to be unreal. So we're here for a while in this data field. I have a feeling.
Well, the whole concept of digital exhaust and all the instrumentation that's going on, pretty much of everything is something that creates unique opportunities and also challenges for a
Yeah.
lot of organizations, because now they are having to contend with more scale and diversity than they've ever seen before. And so really thinking about what the architecture is that's going to support that, and at the same time still support this idea of self-service. And I think we've, from the very beginning, and I think Trifacta sort of shared this point of view very deeply, as does Alteryx, but very deeply have felt that it's really important for the people who know the data best to be able to do this work.
Yeah.
And it's the people who have context in their heads, who sort of understand how the data gets used to make business decisions, the ones who are asking the very searching questions about the business. We want to empower them, and they're not necessarily all structured programmers. Some of them are developers, but I would say we don't want this to become the exclusive purview of the highly technical. These are often data driven professionals. They live in data every day, but we want to help them both automate some of the complexity away so that they can just go faster, but at the same time we also want to make building these data products more accessible than ever before, because now you want to get to a point where you can unleash this across the entire organization. You're talking about potentially thousands of users, rather than a tiny handful that actually get to go in and work directly with the data and really drive the impact on the business. And I think organizations that get that,
Yeah.
and that are able to really turn on the entire organization and get them deeply involved with data, instead of just telling them to be more data driven,
Yeah.
actually empowering them to be more data driven.
Yeah.
They're going to create outsized gains. They're going to distance themselves from competition, and they're going to win in the market over the next decade.
Absolutely. And that's the main topic of our conversation here today. It's about bringing analytics for all. And when we talk about analytics for all, we're talking about data democratization, and what you're defining here, just not having the small group of technical folks who have access to data, but get access to everyone who wants it or needs it. So I guess how do we actually get there, and what does data democratization really mean for those who maybe have never heard the term before?
Yeah, sure. So, I think, I think that there's always been a little bit of this this challenge of trying to think about how to empower the line of business. And I think the old model was certainly, okay, let's centralize as much of this work as possible.
Mhm.
The systems are complicated, the data is complicated. We'll bring in technical people that can help provision this data on behalf of the users, and so you end up with this kind of impedance mismatch where if you just think about the raw numbers, it's like how many analysts or line of business professionals are there on the planet, right? It's like it's dramatically more than there are data scientists on the planet, right?
Right.
So or even data engineers on the planet, right? So you then take that to your organization, and you're talking about potentially thousands and thousands of users in some large organizations that are trying to to use data to improve the execution of their day-to-day function and
Mhm.
drive the business. And usually there's a much smaller handful of individuals that are tasked with supporting them. And so right there, you already have the makings of a massive bottleneck that's just going to create a lot of pain and frustration. I was working with a large financial institution, and they have a quantitative trading group. And so they had roughly 250 quants, split roughly equally between fixed income and equities.
Mhm.
And they had about 8 people that were responsible for the data lake that these quants were leveraging. Now you can imagine the backlog of work. They said, listen, the backlog of work, the voracious demand for data from this group, right? Because these are individuals who are trying to create training sets of data that are going to birth algorithms that you can trade on. And they said the voracious appetite of data meant that the backlog of work that those 8 people had to provision cuts of data was measured in years. And,
Oh, wow.
and then we can't hire our way out of this because we don't have the budget. And even if we had the budget, finding the talent is super hard. And so they said the only solution to this was to take raw zones on their data lake, to open it up to the quants and let them do interactive exploration and experimentation, on their own. And then eventually they're going to get to something where they're going to be like, there's an aha here, and I want to take this to market. And at that point, you have to then figure out, how do we get back involved with them rather than being the bottleneck? Let them run. Once they get to something they want to make multi-million-dollar trading decisions on, then we get back involved. And from an IT perspective, we help operationalize that at scale. We, make sure that there's a clear, chain of custody of the data, audit trail the data. Because guess what? The minute you start making trades, people are going to want to know, how did you come up with that algorithm? What was the data set, the training set that birthed that? How was it manipulated along the way, right? So you have to have all that governance in place. And I think, to me, that, that is sort of emblematic of, the power of democratization, but the importance of the role, the collaborative curation that goes on between business and IT, where it's not to say, okay, then it's all about self-service, let the quants run and then do whatever they want. And then, there's sort of no checkpoint or no point at which it comes back into the fold. I think it just sort of changes the dynamic or the relationship between the IT organization that now is not just helping with the scaffolding and the operationalization, but also the governance, and also, by the way, going out and finding cool and interesting data to bring into the data lake that then we can unleash on this group of people. So for me, that was like a really exciting and I think emblematic story that pointed to the power of democratization. Because if you're a little faster in that game, you don't just win a little bit more, like you win all of it until the market catches up with whatever this idea or this algorithm is that you've created. That's millions and millions of dollars of top line benefit, not just sort of operational efficiency benefit, right? And I think that's for me, that that kind of story can play out in big and small ways across organizations globally, but is one kind of indicative example of what democratization can do.
Yeah, I absolutely love. I love the example. I think it's very easy to understand and relate to. So instead of growing your IT department to try and build all these things for people, it's sort of giving people access, but governed access. You don't want them to run wild. Before I go to the next question, I wanted to just remind folks that we are doing the giveaway in just a couple of minutes, maybe 1 or 2 minutes. And we're going to give away a t-shirt that says I heart data. So hashtag love data to play. Now, the question I have for you, Adam, is how does Alteryx actually support these efforts? So we know we can't have everyone be an analyst, a data analyst, data scientist, data engineer. By the way, I do want to ask the audience, if you identify with, which role do you identify closely with? Data analyst, data scientist, or data engineer? Just curious sort of who's joining us here. We're a bit biased because this is a data show and we're probably going to have mostly data professionals here, but we can't have everyone become a data expert, and nor do we want to, right? So I guess my point is, how do we use tools, technology like Alteryx to bridge that gap and allow for broader data democratization?
Yeah. No, so I mean, and this is really at the heart of what Alteryx Analytics Cloud is all about. And for us, really trying to support this, an insight-driven organization with a unified solution in the cloud that really helps automate, everything from data, preparation and analytics to, creating approachable machine learning and automated insights that help tell data stories. And I think that technology as an enabler, plays a huge role in this. And we want to really help organizations empower those end users, and a lot of it is by learning from the data and learning from how the user interacts with the data, right? So so every data set is not a new data set. Odds are somebody has seen something like it before. So in the age of Chat GPT and Open AI, I think what we have been seeing over the last several years is that there's a way to automate more and more of the complexity by by applying AI and ML to the data. And what's interesting in this case is that a lot of people are very focused on how do I get sort of AI and ML from the data. In this particular case, we're actually applying it to the process of taking data from raw to refined and kind of getting to aha moments. And I think that that's really kind of at the heart of what we're trying to do with Alteryx Analytics Cloud. And I think the other piece of that, though, is also recognizing that this is a co-pilot situation, right? This is about creating a user experience that is going to allow for deep engagement, that is going to allow people to very interactively explore the data that they're working with, and to surface those insights and to provide intelligent recommendations and suggestions as to sort of where what to do next and where to go hunt, because we do think that context does matter, as I mentioned, and that means that it's really less about just saying like let the machines go do everything. It's more how do we do this in a way that's assisted, that really speeds the time to insight, and user experience is paramount in that entire process. Otherwise, sure, you could just go live at the command line and you can write thousands of lines of code, but many aren't in a position to do that, either because they may not have the skills or because they just don't simply have the time,
Right.
and they're just like, if there's a way for me to get there in clicks, and to have this be, automated, self-managing, self-documenting, sort of easier to support, all the better. And I think with just how fast the technology is changing, taking a metadata driven approach also is really powerful, because it allows for the work that you do to be applied, to different engines, different architectures, different clouds, without, having to reprogram everything. So usually when I meet with, chief data officers, chief analytics officers, as I'm doing here on this trip, the part of the question I ask them is like, are the technology decisions you're making today the same as the ones you made 5 years ago? And almost every single time the answer is no. And I'm like, okay, so is it reasonable to assume that the technology decisions that you're going to make 5 years from now will be different than the ones you're making today? And they're like, yep. And so they nod vigorously. And I'm like, okay, then we should really be thinking about, an approach that's going to allow you to adapt to whatever comes next, without having to do a full replatforming or rebuild of everything. And taking a metadata driven approach gives you that flexibility, so that as new technology trends come to pass, it's simply a matter of, for us, as a platform company, Alteryx Analytics Cloud can say, okay, great. If it was about Spark and now it's about SQL, no problem, we got you, right? Oh, if it was about, hey, we were doing stuff on prem and now we're doing it in the cloud, no problem, we got you, right? Or we're shifting from one hyperscaler cloud to the next, no problem, right? Like for us, that providing that layer of abstraction, being a decision you make that guarantees your other decisions are changeable, is an incredibly powerful place to occupy in an organization's architecture. It's a hard place to occupy. It requires a lot of expertise and technical acumen, but something I think that customers are really waking up to the benefit of as they try to future-proof all this.
Absolutely. I think finding a partner, technology solution partner that can be flexible to the changing environment and the ability to scale and anticipate what will happen 5 years from now. Like sort of when you were talking about, people writing those lines of code versus a couple of clicks, it's almost like when people were riding horses around and someone invented the automobile or even the airplane, right? No, we rather take the horse because that's how we've been doing it. Like you're not going to take the horse across the country. You're going to fly. But I think it takes time.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. I mean, I think, what I would also say in the same breath, though, is that, like, I don't want this, what has historically been referred to as a, no code, low code approach to doing a lot of the data and analytics to be perceived as anti-code.
Yeah.
There are places where writing a little bit of code makes sense, right? And so I think, as much as anything, we're making a tremendous investment in being more code friendly, so that in the places where code makes sense, we can absolutely embrace code. And we know that there are people who are more keyboard than mouse, right? Who want they, because they have some of the skills and training, or because frankly data is a long tail market, and there's a
Right.
lot of inherent complexity in data, and you're going to bump into some stuff sometimes where writing a little bit of code can get you out of a jam. And so we want to be very open and extensible as a platform that provides those affordances to more technical users as well, because we do think that this is absolutely a team sport, and the data engineers, the data analysts, the data scientists need a way to come together and to collaborate effectively. And so we want to make sure that we can do that. We can be that platform for them.
Right.
But we think it sort of has to start with, taking care of the folks who, for various reasons, need that sort of no code, low code starting point, and then to layer in increasingly, sort of more sophisticated, parts of the product that allow people to write custom SQL, to create user defined functions, to to do things that allow them to to code in the platform. We think is sort of easier to sort of start simple and then provide some of that sophistication than it is to go the other way. And
Yes.
I'd say
You'll lose a
most of
lot of people if you start with
and
that, right?
most of the products in the market tend to focus on the more sophisticated users as a starting point, because frankly building the platforms, the user experiences, developing all the algorithms that really cater to that sort of broader community of users is just hard. It's expensive,
Right.
it takes tons of time, and it's easier to to start with a framework that just says, okay, well, the answer is just write lots of code, right? So we're trying to balance the two over time.
Right. And it absolutely makes sense, to make it simple enough that you don't scare people away, but have that level of
Mhm.
sophistication for those who are more technical. Just
That's right.
hopping into the chat, I know I asked the audience a question of who's here. So we've got data scientist, data analyst, data engineer, data researcher. Let's see, just mostly looks like lots of data analysts, and I think that is sort of expected that
Yep.
you'd have more data analysts, then you'd have data engineers, sorry, data scientists, and then data engineers would probably be a bit fewer in between all of that. So it was
Sure.
definitely interesting to
It's
see.
a microcosm for for what you see in every company, right?
Yeah,
In terms of
yeah,
that
absolutely.
balance, or that ratio. And I
Yeah.
think that one of the funny conversations I had recently was, one of the customers I was meeting with came back, and what he said to me was, he's like, as we start thinking about self-service and democratization, um,
Hmm.
we're taking a whole bunch of this work that frankly, provisioning cuts of data, doing a lot of the janitorial work on the data, it's frankly work that we didn't covet, right? Like, it was work that was frankly bogging us down, keeping us from doing some of the more kind of higher end algorithmic work, or working on some of the sort of bigger, more sophisticated projects. We're giving that work to the users, and they're thanking us for giving
Yeah.
them work, right? Because they're just like, oh my gosh, thank you. Because now it used to be, I'd say, well, I've got a question. Okay, so now what do I do? Well, I have to like lob that over write up a spec, lob that over the fence, and then usually I have to wait 6 months for somebody to add this to the intergalactic data model, or
Hmm.
add it to a data warehouse where I can finally look at the data. And then once I get eyes on the data, I'm like, well, now that I see the data, it's not really what I wanted. Or now that I see the
Yeah.
data, my questions have changed. I have a whole nother set of questions. And so that just becomes this very like slow, lumbering, painful process that makes everybody insane. And so
Yeah.
now what you're doing, you're kind of handing them, that work, and you're saying, listen, like, get after it. And then again, it sort of, again, frees the folks that were stuck, doing this constant provisioning, it frees them up to, again, go and start to either work on other projects that are, higher leverage to the organization, or to, in some cases, crowdsource the best stuff. So we have companies we work with who are saying, I'm going to unleash the team. But again, it's not a Wild West situation. Once I sort of see what they're doing, I'm going to find the best stuff. I'm going to bring it back in. I'm going to standardize it. I'm going to pour concrete around the pipelines. And then I'm going to make sure the whole organization gets the benefit of that as I sort of move it from, maybe, kind of raw zones to more refined zones, and standardize it as part of what we're doing as an organization. So I think if you're thoughtful about it, I think it actually elevates, kind of the importance of all the roles that are involved in this, and allows, sort of everyone to reach their full potential, given their kind of core technical acumen and experience. And I think, to me, that's what's a lot of fun about this.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And speaking of fun, it is time for our giveaway. So I'm going to put this on the screen here, #LoveData in honor of Valentine's Day. So we're going to draw our first raffle. This is for a t-shirt that says I Heart Data on it, and I will be shipping that out after the show. So if you see your name on there, Salim, congratulations.
Right.
Please reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I'll get your mailing address and make sure you get a t-shirt. We will have one more giveaway towards the end of the show, so just keep putting those hashtags in there. And don't forget, if you have any questions for Adam or myself, drop those into the chat as well. Now, Adam, I wanted to shift the conversation a bit to cloud, and I'm putting a statistic on the screen here.
Okay.
So according to Gartner, by 2023, which we're in already, 75% of all databases will be on a cloud platform, and 74% of organizations will use cloud-based analytics platforms. I guess, and my question to you is, why are companies going to the cloud? What are some of the benefits that you're seeing?
Sure. Well, I think a lot of this comes down to, providing a lot more, flexibility and agility, and when we talked earlier about, like, the exploding data diversity, the increasing data volumes, all of that, creates technical challenges. How do you get at the data? How do you bring the data together? How do you expose it to users? How do you do it in a way that, is unencumbered, from infrastructure, in the sense that, it's more elastic. So, all of those things, I think, have made, cloud the logical choice for much of this data. And you're seeing that play out in those statistics. I tend to focus less on the cost side of cloud. I think a lot of organizations say, well, gee, if I can get out from under a lot of the infrastructure that I'm purchasing, cloud, may be more affordable. I don't know. I would say the jury's a little bit out on that, depending on your use. It's I think there are certain use cases where it is a much more cost-effective solution because it's more consumption-based and it's more on demand. I think there's other cases where, as the data gets put into an environment where it's easier for more people to get in and make use of it, I think in some cases it may end up costing you a bit more upfront. But when you think about the benefit that you're getting by just having more data in the hands of more people, being able to make better decisions that impact your business, I would say the value to the business is massive, right? And so, while some of the infrastructure may be a little bit more expensive, the reality is, like, you're, through these consumptive models, you're sort of paying as you get value. So, if you're actually spending a little bit more, presumably you're getting substantively more value as you go. And I think that's, in the end, that's the goal, right? We want to get to a point where there are not these frictions that are preventing people from taking advantage of the data they have under management and getting after more and more data, whether that's open data, government data, dark data from third-party marketplaces that are increasingly easier to sort of buy and incorporate into your data sets. And I think it's caused us to kind of more radically rethink what is then the tool chain around these new cloud data warehouse, cloud data lakehouse environments, because some of there are advantages, when you can start thinking about relatively unlimited diversity and relatively unlimited scale, and thinking about like being able to bring this up in a browser and in a matter of clicks, sort of get to information. I think we and as we start to go forward, because the volumes and the diversity have grown so much, the tool chain needs to get better at really thinking about, how can we get the data sets to suggest their own insights, or how can we get the data sets to essentially suggest their own data quality checks, right? It's like too much for a human being on their own, to do this, where, I have to go in and, sort of upfront, sort of have some reasonable understanding of, kind of what's going on in the data. And you're in a situation where in many cases, it's like needles in haystacks, and the haystacks are coming at you in real time. So how are you going to do that? Well, you're only going to do that if, again, you can put the machines to work and allow them to go in and actually, sort of do a lot of the analysis up front, and really bring focus to the things that seem consequential. Whether those are data quality checks or whether those are insights that, you're surfacing, from the data set, so that then it gives the user a running start to say, okay, if this is what's interesting, now let me start to kind of explore a bit more in some of these areas. And that's the kind of thing, speed insights. And it's kind of moving away a little bit from, hey, can we just dashboard everything, and can we just like have, talked to a company yesterday, is like, we really have like 6,000 dashboards that are maintained. And I'm like, that can't possibly be.
I'm not surprised. Right? Was it a bank?
And so you sit there and you say, well, okay, if we want to sort of move away from that model where everyone's sitting around, staring at static dashboards or building out static dashboards, it's really like, let's not focus so much on how pretty the visualization is, or let's not focus just on sort of the flat reporting, but really, can we start to now think about kind of getting to root cause analysis? Can we start to think about identifying explanatory values or variables that are sort of driving some of the outcomes that we're seeing in the market? I think that's, to me, where it gets really interesting, and even starting to think about how we can get broader sets of users who potentially haven't thought a lot about things like predictive modeling, or classification, and some of the things that ML has been great at. It's like, how do we upskill that workforce so that they all, if you have thousands of people and they all become sort of 10% more effective, like the productivity impact that has at a time when everybody's trying to do more with less is just off the charts, right? So to me, that's the exciting stuff.
Well, yeah, and that brings me up to sort of this next topic I wanted to cover, which is the analytics divide, right? So we have people in an organization, and then we have technology and processes, right? Those are three things at play. So let's say we've got the processes that are all straightforward, and we start investing a lot of money into tools and technology that we're hoping will sort of just answer all our hopes and wishes. But sometimes we miss the boat on that, where we've got the technology, but it might not be as simple to use, as intuitive, and there's a bit of training. And sometimes it is easy. Like, there were tools that were so easy that people were so against because of this fear of the unknown. And once I showed them to them, they're like, oh, this was actually so straightforward. I wish this is easier than Excel. Like, yeah, okay, now you get it. But I think it does take a little bit of hand-holding and training. And I wanted to ask, what have you guys done at Alteryx to close that divide?
Yeah. Well, and you're kind of also getting to this kind of maturity question too, which I think is super, super interesting. We did an analytics maturity assessment recently, and we just published the results of. And one of the things respondents said was that leaders, who there's roughly about 22% of leaders who talk about the importance of analytics of their company also put what they say into action, right? So I mean, we are, on that maturity curve, which Alteryx does a lot of work in and around this area, creating surveys to help you understand where you are and understand what great looks like, and what are the steps to get there. But what we find is that most organizations are in a pretty basic stage, right? And that there's a lot of gains in moving up on that maturity curve. And I think, from the beginning, and this is something for someone who's relatively new to Alteryx, I think was both sort of just amazingly impressive and exciting, was to see, how a lot of this starts very early, right? So a massive investment, in bringing a lot of these ideas and these technologies, into classrooms, working with students and, getting them, to develop not just data literacy, but real competency with doing this kind of work. And so a massive program that we call Sparked, which is Spark ED. So it's basically trying to create the next generation of modern data workers and investing aggressively behind that, with not just training and curriculum, but also access to software, access to internships, job placement, all kinds of things that are about investing in the future of this. But then beyond that, a lot of it has come down to really building a robust community where it's not just about us, right? It's really about, like, can people teach each other? Can they collaborate and share with each other? And that's everything from experiences and best practices all the way to literally assets, right? Where it's like, hey, I've built macros that are interesting to me. Maybe others want that, or templates, or things that just to what I said kind of earlier. It's like every data set's not a new data set. Odds are somebody has seen something like it before, right? So if we can activate the community in solving a lot of what are reasonably common problems, and if we can abstract that into into patterns, into models that we can kind of give to the world, to accelerate whatever it is they're doing, then that just makes everybody better, stronger, faster. And so I think there's a very deep and abiding commitment to that kind of community building, and to that kind of education.
And yeah, I think we mentioned a couple of other things, and I'll make sure to drop the links into the chat after the session. So I'll link to the survey results. I'll find the community and share that with the audience as well. And I see Roberto had a question here earlier. That Gartner statistic, I'll share where we found that as well. And I completely agree with you. I think that power of the community, especially, is so important. Going back to your example where there were 6,000 dashboards, right? Is there a way? I'm assuming many of them were duplicates. So I've worked with companies before where team A and team B are building literally the same thing for sometimes even the same audience, and they're slightly different, and you don't need all that. It's just such a waste of time and efficiency and everything, really. Do you think
that's where the machines can help again, right? Like, so why isn't it possible for the system to say, hey, what you're doing, somebody has already done. Are you sure you don't want to grab onto that? Or
that would be perfect. Imagine that. Can you imagine if you're building something and the tool's like, wait, we have this for you already? Oh, that would be so blissful.
So stay tuned, right? Because I mean, this is the logical extension, right? Like, a lot of it started with ideas around, again, what we described as predictive transformation, where it's like, hey, as I start to touch the data, highlight things in the data, the system will say, oh, we think what you're trying to do is one of these 7 things. And then you can click on it, see an immediate preview of what the data would look like if you applied that logic or that transformation. Then you start doing some of the things I mentioned a moment ago, which is like, okay, can the system start to suggest its own data quality checks? Can the system start to suggest its own insights, where the places where you might want to go spend time and give your attention? And then, at some point you start building up a lot of these assets, and then it's like, okay, can the system actually start to, kind of recommend and suggest starting points, or like, hey, people like you who are doing this kind of work tended to, tended to grab onto these data sources, or tended to work with these reports, or tended to, kind of tended to do work in these areas. So it's like, these are all things that are frankly, not terribly complicated these days to do, algorithmically. And,
Right.
and that will help cut down on redundant things, that will help cut down on sort of the sprawl and proliferation, that exists in some of these systems, and just make everybody much more efficient, and more likely to be, sort of using a reasonably single version of truth. If you get to a point where you could also then, have those involved with governance kind of put a gold star next to the data sets that are sanctioned, or next to some of the analysis, the analytics that are sanctioned, then that also provides more social proof, or top-down, validation that, like, hey, I'm using things that, that the organization has blessed in some fashion. And so that's what I mean a little bit about, like,
Yeah.
blowing up this sort of, what I think is a false trade-off between, well, you can either self-serve or you can govern, and never the twain shall meet. Right. And I'm like, well, I don't, I think that, yes, there was a period where, data governance was, how many ways can I say no? And
Or
then,
hold off as long as possible, right?
yeah, and then you ended up in a world where all of a sudden people started self-serving, and they kind of worked around the rules of the organization, and a lot of
Yeah.
the centralization, by just saying, hey, we got to go faster, and we're just going to find a way to do it. And if you don't create a way for us to do it, then we'll be in the shadows, right? And now I think that genie's out of the bottle. But I think now people with cloud are bringing this all back together, and they're saying, like, okay, we know that self-service is still going to be paramount, but as things move to the cloud, there is a chance to regain, some sense of collaboration, sharing, governance, versioning, all the things, because now the cloud is going to bring some things that became very decentralized, back into focus in a centralized way. And so I think that, to me, is like an exciting moment in time to, like, really rethink this process a little bit, because guess what? IT is going to, they're going to select the cloud. They're going to typically find the services that are available. They're also they're responsible for the bill, right? So at least in most organizations, they may charge it back, but they're responsible for the bill. So, what they're going to want to do is now say, okay, how do we kind of welcome the users, like, onto this platform, but do it in a way in which we can keep track of security and controls and cost and all of these things. And I think this is a unique moment in time that it's like, don't let this cloud modernization, or this transformation that's happening, don't let it go to waste. Like, use it as a chance to really sort of bridge the worlds, and to, sort of bring the users back together in a way that, self-service and governance, can coexist in a very thoughtful, deliberate way.
Absolutely. And you just touched on the next and last topic I wanted to cover was the concept of collaboration and security simultaneously, where you're able to work together not only with each other in a team, but also get more access to data whilst in your sort of domain of where you need to sit. So you don't necessarily see the data you're not supposed to have access to. And I guess that's just a process that needs to take place before you can start to really take advantage of these tools, where you need to really think through everyone's roles and make sure that, person A can see this data but can't see that data, but also not limit them from potential future data they might see and need to see. And it's not that simple, right? Like, it might be simple for a very small company, but the larger you get, and global, and all those rules and data privacy, that can't be easy, right?
Yeah, no, there's nothing simple about it. And I think that this is an area where a lot of the underlying cloud infrastructure vendors, the cloud platform, the Googles, the AWSs, the Microsofts, like, everybody's spending a lot of time and effort. Also, a lot of startups that are innovating, in this area as well, that are trying to sort of think about sort of new ways to kind of manage entitlements, authentication, authorization, trying to, make some of that, like, almost travel with the data itself. And so I think you're going to see, increasing, innovation, in this area. that's going to sort of help, stare down a bunch of the challenges that I think cause people to pause a little bit, or just that slow down projects because it just takes so long to put a lot of those rules, in place. And, I think, for me, it's sort of it's a little bit of this idea of like, you have to take a bit of a risk adjusted approach to all of this. Like when people sort of talk about governance and even security to some extent, I think everyone sort of always assumes the most extreme example, which is like, oh, this is highly sensitive, you know, um, you know, personnel data, or, financial regulatory reports or whatever. And if you sort of look at the continuum of the data that's under management in enterprise, there are absolutely, elements of what they're doing that have to be locked down, incredibly curated, incredibly protected and secured, and it warrants, sort of the full treatment. But if you really step back and sort of look at sort of all the data under management, it's a mistake to assume that sort of all data needs that level, um, of high degrees of governance, and really there's, in most organizations, there's a lot of data that velocity, matters more than precision,
Right.
or where the governance and controls that you need around that data just isn't as doesn't need to be. You just need to sort of think about a risk adjusted approach where, not all data is created equal, not all data is equally sensitive, not all data is needs to be, governed with the same standards.
Right.
And, if you're over here pouring concrete, because you're doing financial reporting to regulators, that's, totally makes sense. But
Right.
if you're also over here running a marketing campaign where you're just trying to look at some, ad spend, and you're trying to sort of tune, targeting that you're doing for, for AdWords that you're doing, like it would be a mistake to apply this level of rigor to that data,
Right.
because there you may be making decisions that need to happen, more instantaneously, where again, you're running constant experiments where like variables and dynamics are changing so quickly. And if you try to apply those, the same standards that you do for regulatory reporting to that data, you're going to be frozen and you're going to be sort of unresponsive in the market. And so I just always encourage people to really think carefully about, hey, like don't apply the rigor that is needed for the 10% of your data to 100% of it, because then you're going to calcify as an organization. Like really be thoughtful about this risk adjusted approach and where you need what kinds of controls. Controls are valuable, but controls have cost,
Right.
and cost in dollars, and that's cost in velocity. And I think the organizations that really sort of understand that continuum and also recognize that the vast majority of their data, is not in, in that, doesn't require like that highest,
Right.
kind of best sophistication. I think they're the ones that, will, outmaneuver the competition and ultimately be able to get more, again, data in the hands of more users and do it, more flexibly. So.
I think companies do get caught up in saying we have all this data, we can't release it to the teams because like you said, 10%, sometimes it's even like 2 or 3%, right? That's
Yeah,
actually private
sure.
data. And then they try to apply that, and
Yeah.
that sounds a bit inefficient.
Yeah.
And I guess that's why people get stuck, and really don't take action. So I absolutely love that. Thank you for sharing. Adam, we're close to the end, so I just have some very quick questions. A quick reminder to the audience: we're about to do our last raffle giveaway, so #LoveData. But before that final giveaway, I know you have an event coming up in just a couple of days, February 16th.
Yep.
Accelerate your cloud analytics journey. I guess just tell the audience a bit about what can they learn there. And that's another link I will share in the chat once this is over.
Yeah, please do. So this is part of an ongoing series, Alter Next, which is our virtual summits that we host on a periodic basis that just really try to bring together modern data workers and thought leaders to really talk about, what the latest best practices are, how these markets are changing and evolving, technology trends, and we're going to cover some of the details that came out of that analytics maturity assessment. What we're hearing, from the market, and really allowing people to start to benchmark themselves a little bit more.
Mhm.
I feel like that's always a great way to try to get more organizations focused on upskilling and getting to those next levels of maturity. And there's going to be some exciting announcements related to our Alteryx Analytics Cloud platform that are also coming your way. So it should be a jam-packed session, and you'll get to hear directly from customers as well about some of their hard-fought lessons learned, as they've democratized and started to roll this out more broadly. So it should be fantastic. Would love to see many of you there.
Awesome. Yeah, I think the customer journeys are the most interesting, seeing how people actually implement the challenges they faced and sort of how they overcame that. So definitely we'll share the links. It's time for our final giveaway. So again, congratulations to Salim. I'm going to go ahead and draw again. And if you see your name up there, just shoot me a note on LinkedIn and I'll make sure to get you a t-shirt that says I heart data, because Wendy, congratulations, because we all love data here. That's why we're here. That's why we're doing the show. And Adam, final question is for those who have more questions for you, who want to follow up with something, where is the
Sure.
best place that they can reach you?
Sure. So I'm just adam.wilson@alteryx.com. You can also follow me on Twitter, and I'm in LinkedIn as well. So look forward to engaging. And if anybody has any follow-up coming out of the day, I'm more than happy to set up time to chat.
Okay, awesome. Well, Adam, thank you so much for joining us on the DATAcated show. Thank you so much for the audience for your engagement and participation. And happy Valentine's Day. Thanks for taking the time to join us on a holiday. So I'll see everybody online, and stay DATAcated.
All right. Thank you.